every single item that you bring out, you've now introduced into the situation.
You've brandished.
Right.
Yep.
And potentially you've put something into play that now could be utilized against you. A lot of times people feel like if I draw my pepper spray, if I draw my taser, if I draw my baton, I now have the upper hand in this situation. And oftentimes, a lot of times in security, those items end up in the hands of the person that you're dealing with. Now, you've introduced a non-lethal or a less than lethal or even a lethal weapon into a situation that could potentially be used against you. Now, if that happens, what's the next logical step? You as the officer are going to escalate, and that's where you enter a point of no return, which leads us to the conversation that we were going to have today about the recent shooting that happened in Maryland at a McDonald's.
That's correct.
That basically was a private security guard that was tasked with, securing this McDonald's location. They have a lot of loitering. They have a lot of potential violence and non-positive activities. But there's a situation where a gentleman is inside of the McDonald's, has some sort of back and forth with the security guard. Security guard pepper sprays this individual. Instead of the individual leaving, the individual sits down in one of the booths. And that starts a back and forth in a series of events that ultimately leads to the death of this said individual. What are your thoughts on what happened, what you saw, and kind of what happened?
The guy was super stern, like, you need to leave, tried escorting him from the premises. The guy sat down, refused to leave, and this officer brandished his pepper spray, sprayed him while he was down, not doing anything, ultimately escalating it, continued to have this back and forth with the guy. Then he drew his baton, and there's argument whether it's passive resistance or active resistance, whether or not the loiterer was trying to take the baton or just prevent himself from getting smacked with it.
Right.
There's debate to that, but ultimately he grabs the security guard's baton, holds it, and doesn't let go. Security guard gets it back, and the guy turns his back to him. The security guard just wails into him, and ultimately it leads to the security guard pulling his gun and shooting him.
So two things here, the introduction of a tool or a weapon into the issue between we'll just say the trespasser and the security guard, that doesn't necessarily mean that the situation is going to stop. And again, a lot of times, private security guards, and you see this with people in a concealed carry environment, they think that just by producing this weapon, brandishing this weapon, that the other person is going to automatically go, okay, hey, look, my bad. Yeah. Let's just stop this. The other person has the same desire to not get pepper sprayed, the same desire to not be tased, the same desire to not be hit with a baton. Whether or not it's justified or warranted is irrelevant. That other person doesn't want to be hurt or harmed any more than you do, even though they might be doing something that has led to you producing said tool. So their desire to have self-preservation doesn't change because they're the bad person or they're the person that's causing the problem. And by simply producing it, it doesn't mean that the situation's over. And again, you've now introduced something that can potentially be used against you. Also, for private security guards and for the average person as well, you have to understand where the interaction stops and the threat ceases to exist, and whether or not you are going from the potential victim to now becoming the aggressor. The second that you produce something and you're giving the command for a person to stop, person to leave or to disengage, when they do so and they turn and they're walking away, if you as the private security guard decide to hit them with that baton, like in this situation, you have now restarted a secondary situation, a secondary contact, and now you are the aggressor in that situation. And everything that comes from that, you're now responsible for it. So in this situation, you see the security officer having the back and forth with this person, and when that person decides to give up, to disengage, to walk away, and the private security guard then hits him, now this is another situation where the security guard is now the aggressor, and everything that comes from that is now his responsibility, including the fatal shooting.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so now you're seeing a private security guard who, in the commission of his duties is now arrested for second-degree murder, is going to be placed on trial, and potentially, could lose the better part of the rest of his life. This is an older guy in his 50s. You get 10, 20 years. It's basically a life sentence.
Basically, yeah.
So important to understand where to disengage, also to understand where to stop the interaction. But all of this comes from being trained, being educated, and also having a heart of compassion and empathy, and doing your absolute best to not take something to that nth degree if you don't have to.
I 100% agree. Yeah, know when to stop. There are forces above you that you don't always have to answer for yourself.
A great tool that you don't carry on your vest, you don't carry in your pocket, but should always be in your heart and your mind as an officer, is the tactical disengagement. When you're dealing with anyone, regardless of the level of the disagreement, whether it's at that level of conversation or something has gotten to the point where something has been deployed, you can always disengage. We're not law enforcement officers. We do not have to win. That's the beauty of what we do. We can always observe and report. We have no duty to act. And if something is going to a point where you can't return from it, you can always say to yourself and to the other person, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a step back. You got it. We're going to call the cops and we're going to let you guys work it out. At that point in time, your thought process is on protecting the customers and your client and yourself. But you're giving this person all of the space. You're giving this person all of the room. You're giving them all of the ample opportunity to leave and not engage. And when you take those 5, 6, 7, 8 steps back, and you've told this person that you don't want to fight, you've told this person you don't want to have any more disagreement, now if they encroach on you and something happens, you are in so much better footing than if you go after someone after they've already tried to disengage.